Hello, I'm Pedro Mora with Pacific Media. Now, polling. Government legislation should be a reflection of what we, the people, think our needs are. However, often government policies are different than what we, the people, want. During this election, we, the citizens, have a unique opportunity to effectively negotiate with candidates the policies we want implemented or changed. An important federal issue, which neither the media nor the politicians are talking about during this election, is the state of our justice system. Now polling.ca shows a disconnection between a restorative justice system, which would better serve Canadians, and what the current government is proposing, which is directing billions of dollars into building bigger jails and mega penitentiaries. Today, we are discussing restorative justice with Gillian Lindquist. And you work with restorative justice?
Yeah, the Victoria Restorative Justice Society.
And what exactly is restorative justice?
Restorative justice is a community-based approach to addressing crime and harmful behavior that happens within the community. So it's more of a philosophy than anything else. Basically, the philosophy is that the people that are most directly impacted by a harmful event, and it can be a criminal event or a non-criminal event, such as bullying in schools, are the people who are most affected are the people who should be involved in determining what's happened, how the community's been harmed, and what needs to be done to make things right.
Mm-hmm. You said it's an ideology or philosophy, but is it also a movement that are working towards the development of it?
Yeah, there's certainly a movement taking place, and in each community and area, it has its own unique aspects. So here in Victoria, the movement's actually quite strong. On Vancouver Island, there are, I think, over 30 restorative justice programs in the various communities. Some of them are specifically Aboriginal programs, and some of them are more, urban city programs. So there is a strong movement out here on the island, and there's throughout the country, there's various levels of sort of movement happening, and it's happening all over the world, actually.
And is there separate autonomous groups, or is it centralized under your office?
They're all separate autonomous groups.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But the ideology is shared by all groups.
Yeah, the philosophy is shared by all groups. So one of the unique aspects of restorative justice is that the philosophy is the basis, and so it's sort of, if you think of like a triangle, the philosophies or the ethos is what is the basis of the movement. And then what comes up from there is each organization, depending on the needs of the community it serves and the relationships it has within the criminal justice system, will depend on what the actual organization looks like and how the processes unfold.
Mm-hmm. This group has funding from the government, from volunteers, from how do you fund the movement?
The movement's funded in different ways in each province and often in each city. So the various municipalities will often fund restorative justice programs. Our municipality funds us to some extent, but we don't get much municipal funding. The province funds us very little. So actually the majority of our funding is all raised through our own fundraising efforts. But not all programs are like that. Each program will have a different fundraising or funding agreement with its supporters.
Is it competing with the legal justice system that we have implemented?
No, I think one of the sort of the misconceptions that has happened with restorative justice is that we're two distinct communities working sometimes in competition with each other, which isn't the case. We actually work together. We work in collaboration with each other. So now that's the ideal situation when you have a criminal justice system that accepts and embraces their local restorative justice program. That works really well. If they aren't working together, then it would be a different scenario. But ideally, we receive our referrals from the police and from the Crown Council and from probation and corrections. So we're working with the criminal justice system. So we shouldn't be working in competition with each other.
So what are the motives for the police and the Crown attorneys to give you cases when they could do it themselves?
There's a handful of different reasons. I would say that first and foremost are the needs of the people who have been affected by the event. So I think often police and Crown, just like most people who go into their professions, do it because they believe in the work that they do and they want to make a difference in their communities. And I think oftentimes when they get into the system, they realize that there are limitations within the system that make sometimes doing their job difficult.
For instance, what would be a limitation?
Well, for example, the court is a massive system, and there are lots of rules around what can and cannot happen in court. Say, for example, victims. Victims have basically no say in the court process. The only power that they're given is to read a victim impact statement aloud in court, which is definitely something, except the victim impact statements are highly edited. They aren't even allowed to say what they think the outcome should be. So basically, they aren't allowed to say anything about sentencing. So a Crown prosecutor who is aware that victims have a strong need around meeting the offender, asking questions, getting information, and having a say in what the outcome is going to be, the court system isn't going to work very well for those victims because their needs are not going to be met in that system. So what the Crown is able to do then is go, okay, well, we know a system and have a relationship with an organization who can provide you provide for your needs that we can't in our system.
And one of those needs is restoration.
Yeah. So often, and restoration can mean a lot of different things. So restoration can be something really tangible, like maybe somebody's car got broken into and $300 of stuff got stolen and they get paid $300 back. You know, it can be very tangible and concrete, or it can be symbolic as well. So, for example, we had a recent case, traffic fatality, where what one of the victims wanted was the offender to plant a tree in honor of the deceased. So, you know, that's sort of it's a symbolic form of restitution, but it's meaningful to the people who are involved in the process.
That is the restoration of the victim. How about the restoration of the mindset of the aggressor?
So that's in the agreements that we make, that there's three major components that we try to ensure are completed or at least addressed in the agreement. So the first one is restitution to the victims. That's the most important aspect of the agreement. The second is restitution to the community at large. So not only the victims have been affected, but the larger community has also been affected by this event. And then the third thing is ensuring that the person who committed the offense is going to get the needs and supports they require, that they're not going to commit an offense like this again in the future. So sometimes that means anger management support, sometimes it means addictions counseling or support, mental health support. So we try and ensure, and there's lots of different creative ways that we try and ensure that the person who committed the offense, the underlying reasons for their actions are dealt with in the process, which is one of the benefits of restorative justice, is that we can do that. We have that capacity because our processes are flexible and open versus contained and structured.
Are there the institutions necessary to help the aggressors, say anger management? Is there enough funding from the government to run workshops where people can reivindicate themselves, can change their mindset?
From my perspective, there are not nearly enough resources out there for people. We encounter that around anger management courses, around counseling in particular, because often there's not free or inexpensive counseling available for offenders. So one of the things that makes restorative justice successful is having the foundations present within the community to support people in repairing themselves and the community. And sometimes we manage because we have relationships with service providers in the community, but it is difficult sometimes to find the resources we require.
Mm-hmm. So you are geared, your organization here is geared to provide those workshops for anger management. And how about sexual abusers rather?
Our organization hasn't dealt with any sexual assault cases as of yet. There are organizations that we know that have done it, restorative justice organizations.
Here in Victoria?
Not in Victoria. We're the only program in Victoria. The one that I'm thinking about is in BC, the Fraser program. They deal with very serious offenses.
Is that in Vancouver?
Mm-hmm. In the Fraser Valley.
Oh, okay. That is Abbotsford.
Oh, okay. Don't know the area that well.
All right. What would you like the politicians to do, or people to lobby the politicians for, in order for your group to be more successful?
I think, like most organizations that are working within sort of the nonprofit structure, there needs to be more funding given to these organizations. I mean, that's just the very bare bones of it. Our organization, we get around between 80 to 100 referrals a year. We manage over 60 active volunteers and deal with everything. We deal with from fatalities to shoplifting. We deal with a wide range of offenses, and we do all of that with just over one full-time position within our organization, in addition to running other programs out of our organization as well. So we've been able to manage to do what we do on a shoestring budget, but really it's not the best outcome. There needs to be more. If there was more money being given to restorative justice programs, they could be doing a lot of work. They could be offloading a huge amount of work that is currently in the criminal justice system, meeting the needs of those affected by crime to a greater degree, and really reducing the costs on taxpayers, because court is very expensive. The other thing that needs to happen is there needs to be more resources available, funded resources available, things like counseling, anger management, supports out there for people who have been either affected by crime or have committed an offense. So that includes things like victim services, which victim services seems to constantly be losing portions of its funding, and that's a really great resource for victims.
When you say resource, you're referring to money or to
money? Okay. Usually money, but all sorts of resources.
Like what?
Some victim services programs have lost their housing, so a lot of them are housed within the police department, and police departments have been here and there sort of removing victim services and telling them they need to find their own venues, and so it's just little things that make a big difference for organizations that are running on very little.
So when you say housing, it's not housing for the poor. You're talking of housing for offices like this.
Yeah, for their services. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Then the other thing that would really provide some support to restorative justice programs is if the government would make a clear mandate around the use of restorative justice, and really say to the ministries that are involved and to the public that this is a viable and effective, meaningful way to address crime, and that this is something that we want to put our resources and energy into, because there hasn't been much in the way of a strong statement around the use of restorative justice. And so, and in addition to that, there's lots of legislation that exists that leaves the use of restorative justice sort of unclear or wishy-washy. So legislation could be changed, there could be clear statements of support made, and then funding, and I think that would make all the difference.
Mm-hmm. Is there a group of people that are working on an alternative legislation to offer to politicians?
There are a handful of groups that are doing sort of their own thing and dealing with certain aspects of legislative movement. So one of the organizations that's quite active here on Vancouver Island is the Vancouver Island Regional Restorative Justice Association. It's called VRJA. And they do a lot in terms of, sort of lobbying the government around legislative changes and more support for restorative justice, in particular to the programs on the island. And then there are other groups across the country that are doing various forms of movement. There's the Alberta Restorative Justice Association, ARJA, who does a lot of work as well. And then there's a provincial delegate. Actually, she's in the Ministry of Public Safety, I believe. She's the Provincial Restorative Justice Coordinator, and she does a lot as well. But
she works with the government?
She's a ministry employee. Yeah, and so she's the...
What's her name?
Her name's Catherine Bargan.
Okay.
Yeah, so she's been working in restorative justice for a very long time. She's published quite a few works and has been working in serious crime work within the Community Justice Initiatives program. So she's certainly an advocate for restorative justice. However, she's sort of a standalone person who's kind of left to her own devices.